Good morning, friends, and welcome to New Garden Friends meeting. What a beautiful first day this is for us as we worship together in person once again. And welcome to those who are joining us on Zoom this morning or through Facebook Live. This is a first in the history of New Garden Friends meeting. We have never before been both in person and digital. And because it is a first, there inevitably will be some problems. But I am so grateful that we are gathering together this way, that we are able to gather online, that we are able to be together in person. And I know that you all are going to be gracious and kind about any ways that we might fall short this morning. Friends, you are welcome here at New Garden Friends meeting. No matter where you are from and no matter where you may be on your spiritual journey, there is a place for you here at New Garden Friends meeting. Friends, let us begin worship together this morning. I have a reading to share with all of you. It is from the book of Genesis. I'm reading the New Revised Standard Version, although I have ungendered the language for God. I'm reading chapter 3 of Genesis, verses 8 through 15. Adam and Eve heard the sound of God walking in the garden at the time of the evening breeze. And the man and the woman hid themselves from the presence of God among the trees of the garden. But God called out to them and said to them, "Where are you? Where have you gone?" And the man answered and said, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I am naked and I hid myself." And God said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree which I commanded you not to eat?" And the man said, "The woman who you gave to be with me, she gave me the fruit from the tree, and I ate it." And then God said to the woman, "What is it that you have done?" And the woman said, "The serpent has tricked me, and I ate from the tree." And God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you among all animals, among all the wild creatures, and upon your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers, and they will strike your head, and you will strike at their feet." Friends, let us enter together into our silent waiting worship. From the silence, I will bring my prepared message this morning. The creation stories in Genesis are some of the best known parts of Scripture and some of the most widely misunderstood parts of our holy text. These stories have been used to hurt and oppress women for thousands of years. And so if you, like me, find yourself filled with distaste when you hear this story, that is very understandable. This story in particular, when Eve eats from the tree in the Garden of Eden, and Adam and Eve must leave paradise, this story has been used to define women, to define us as sinful, as weak-willed, as evil and destructive. The damage that this story has done is enormous. And therefore, it is one that I approach cautiously, and one that I believe has to be read very deliberately and thoughtfully. As we together enter into this story, it is first important to note the main characters. There is Adam and Eve, the humans created by God and named as good. Created and then named as good. And then we have God in this story, God who is dwelling, as God always does, close by humankind. The last character in this story is the snake. I think some of you know that I do not like snakes. I do not. I understand that they are generally more afraid of me than I am afraid of them. Although I'm pretty afraid of them, so that's hard to believe. But I have a bone-deep dislike of snakes. I think it's the way they move. They go quick in a way that I don't like. Still, I know that there is nothing intrinsically evil about a snake. But in this story, in the Genesis story, this is not just a snake. This is evil. The snake represents all that is evil and all of the evil that will come into human society, into the societies that humankind will build. So it is evil that slithers through this story. Evil that is at the heart of this story that is about human shame and fear. We all know evil, although some of us may not use that language to talk about it. Evil is the careless systems that allow children to starve in poverty. It is evil that is the system of racism within our country that led to the enslavement of humans and that led to the systematic dehumanization of Black people throughout our history. Evil is hate in action. Evil is also the lies that are within you, the lies that tell you that you are worthless or unlovable. Sometimes humans, driven by hate or fear or illness or pain or greed, sometimes humans act in ways that are evil. But evil lurks most deeply within systems, within culture. It is the lies and the traditions that are heteronormative, the systems of racism that dehumanize, colonialization, which weaponizes greed, capitalism, which tells people they are only worthy if they are working. It is the cultural lies of sexism that lead to generations of sexual abuse and trauma and pain against women. That is evil. And we all recognize it. when we see it within ourselves or when we encounter it in the world. Evil slithers through paradise, which God has created. It strikes first at Eve and then at Adam, and it leaves something horrible in its wake. It leaves Eve and Adam ashamed and fearful. Interestingly enough, evil does not leave general shame in its wake. It leaves Adam and Eve ashamed of their bodies and fearful because of that shame. Adam said, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I am naked, and I hid myself away." Up until this point, Adam and Eve have lived within the sense of goodness, the goodness that God proclaimed within them when God created them in God's own image. They believed that they were good up until this point in the story. They believed that their bodies were good, and they were not ashamed, and they were not afraid. Evil has distorted their sense of goodness, beginning with the sense of the goodness of their very beings, the goodness of their bodies. Body shame, that is such a familiar face of evil to most of us, perhaps especially for women, which is why it is so poignant to me that in this story, Eve is struck first by evil. We, and I mean all people, not just women, we are told by the world in countless ways that our bodies are not good enough. We are faulted for the shape and the size of our bodies. If we are small, then we are too small. If we are large, then we are too large. We are faulted too for any limitation in our bodies, whether it is a perceived or a real limitation. We are faulted for how our bodies move through the world. We are faulted too for how we may choose to alter or decorate our bodies. Our hair, it is too bright or too short or too long for someone our age. Our tattoos are unattractive or unprofessional. Our shoes are either impractical and too fancy, or they are too plain and too ugly. Sexism and homophobia and transphobia and racism and capitalism, they all come together, those systems of evil, and they create a toxic mix that strikes at our bodies. They tell us relentlessly that our bodies are purely for the enjoyment of others or are unattractive, that they do not appear straight enough, that they do not adhere tightly enough to the gender binary, or they are not white enough to garner respect within our society. Aging. Our society is particularly cruel about how bodies age, how they inevitably change. Wrinkles and graying hair, slower or changed movement, bending shoulders or stiffer joints, all of these things are used as tools against humans to devalue them. So perhaps it should not surprise us that the first face of evil in the creation story The first way that evil arrives within paradise is it strikes first at Adam and Eve's bodies. Their bodies, which are essential to who they are, which impact how they move through the world, which are not simply homes for our souls, but are the very roots that tie us to how we experience creation, and indeed how we can experience God. It is through our bodies that we experience the divine. It would be easy, I think, to walk away from this story in Genesis as simply a sad and true story about how evil impacts us at our roots. It would be easy to walk away once we recognize ourselves within the story. It would be easy to walk away from this story without any good news to lighten our hearts. But as a Quaker, I am unwilling and unable to walk away from this story. I am reminded when I read this story of the possibility of transformation. As a Quaker, when I read this story, I say, it does not need to end like this. For Quakers, transformation is at the heart of our faith. We believe that the Spirit can move within all people, transforming us back into the people that God created us to be. People of mercy, people of justice, people of love. Early Quakers believed in this so fervently that they refused to believe in the sinfulness of humanity. Instead, they believed in human perfectibility. In his journal, George Fox wrote that when he was deep within worship, he felt the movement of the Spirit. And he felt that Spirit so profoundly that he said this, and then I came up in spirit through the flaming sword and into the paradise of God. And all things were new. I knew nothing but pureness and innocence and righteousness. I was renewed in the image of God by Christ Jesus, and I came up into the state of Adam, which he was in before he fell. We Quakers hold to this beautiful possibility that we can move beyond the evils of our world and back into that goodness which is foundational to who we are. We lift up the deep tenacity of the Spirit, that living presence that is constantly dwelling with and within us will always be urging us back towards goodness. We Quakers believe that God strolls beside us, just as God strolled through the Garden of Eden. And we affirm God's abiding faithfulness with us. What can we do to silence the hiss and the slither of shame that may lurk within us, that tells us lies about the worthiness and belovedness of our bodies? We can silence that evil by listening instead to the still small voice that speaks to us in the silence. The voice that sings to us songs of our loveliness, and our belovedness. That voice of the living presence that tells us again and again, I made you good in my own glorious, wild, magical image. I made you in my own image. Friends, my invitation to you this first day is to listen once again to that voice that is within you, that is within the silence that we hold together. That voice that sings throughout creation. Listen again as it tells you the truth of who and what you are. Loved. You are loved. Good. You are good.